Okay. Uh, Thank you, everyone, for joining us for a workshop Wednesday. Today, we're going to hear about an EV charging program from our friends at Power Options. So, with that, I will turn it right over to you, Anna. Please go ahead and
Thank you.
introduce yourself.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. It's great to meet you. My name is Anna Brackenhofer, and I'm a senior analyst for clean transportation at Power Options. I work on everything fleet electrification and EV charging related, and have worked with a lot of municipalities and nonprofits to help them decarbonize their fleet. And to those of you who are not familiar with Power Options is a mission-driven nonprofit. We are a trusted energy partner for nonprofits and public entities across the Northeast. And we help reduce energy costs, carbon, and complexity for our members to help them come up with sustainable solutions for the future. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about our EV charging program, which includes charging solutions for Rhode Island public entities and nonprofits. And I also want to talk to you about the new incentive programs and how you can take advantage of that funding. So first, I would like to talk a bit about EV charging basics, just for you to understand the equipment, the different charging levels and connector types that are available. And then I will dive into the Charge RI, the new rebate that covers up to 95% of equipment and installation costs. And then we will dive into the Power Options procurement for EV charger installation and the different procurement options, VOOM, host-owned, and hybrid. And then we will talk about how to get started. So basically, what are EV chargers? How does it work from kind of an electrical standpoint? So usually it's abbreviated as EVSE, and the job is basically to connect the vehicle to the electricity so that you can successfully charge your car and plug it into an electric vehicle. So here in the graphic on the left, you can see the electric grid infrastructure, which is owned and maintained by your utility. This includes the distribution network, the transformer, and the meter. And then this is connected to your panel. And the panel is usually owned by the site host. And then there's also a conductor, which is also called trenching, to connect the panel to the charger, which then lets you plug the charger into the electric vehicle to charge the battery of the vehicle. And this is called the electric vehicle supply equipment. And there are different ownership models available that we will go over today. So these are just kind of the basics to understand the different components. There are also different charging levels and ports. You might have heard of this. There's level 1 charging, level 2, and DC FC, or DC fast charging, sometimes also called level 3 charging stations. And there are 3 different ports. So here on the bottom right, you can see the different ports and how they look like. So in the middle, you can see the J1772 that's usually used by non-Tesla vehicles for level 2 charging. Then there's also on the right, the CCS combo. This is used mostly by non-Tesla vehicles for DC fast charging. So think of like bigger trucks, semi-trucks, bigger vans. They usually use this type of charger. And then there's also the NACS charger, which is used by Tesla and also a lot of other vehicles that are non-Tesla vehicles for all different charging levels. So for level 1, level 2, and DC charging. So NACS is kind of becoming more of the standard in the industry, and we see that a lot of new vehicles that are being built have this type of charger. And I also want to mention that there are adapters available for all 3 different charging ports, or different ports, so that if you have a vehicle and you want to charge at a station that has a different port, then you can use an adapter to still charge your vehicle. And here on the left in the table, you can see more information about level 2 versus DCFC charging station, where we have the input that is needed, the power for the output, and then also that determines the charging speed of how many miles you can range you can charge per hour of charging. And here for level 2, that's usually 20 to 50 miles of range per hour of charging. So think of level 2 as more an overnight charging situation, or you will have to stay a little bit longer to fully charge your vehicle. And then compared to that, you also have DC fast charging, which is the fastest charger that is available on the market, and that can range from 10 to 80% full in 30 minutes or less, depending on the battery type, the vehicle type, and the app. So now we're going to talk about Charge RI, which is the new funding opportunity that was launched a few weeks or months ago. So basically, the Rhode Island Office of Energy Resources has launched this program, which is a new rebate program and covers up to 80 to 90% of the costs of purchasing and installing the EV charging equipment. So this covers the cost of the actual hardware of the charger and also the installation cost that would be paid to an electrician or an installer. And if your organization is in an environmental justice community, and I've hyperlinked all the links here as well, and we'll be sending out this slide deck, you can qualify for an additional 5% rebate, which will get you up to 95% coverage of the charging stations. There are different sectors that can receive funding. We do have the munis and the educational campus. This is about 20% of the budget. We have workplace charging, which is 10% of the budget, and then publicly accessible commercial sites. So think of a supermarket, which is 25% of the budget, and then also multi-unit dwellings, which is a priority sector. So this is going to receive the majority of the budgets of 45%. Who's eligible to apply? So there are for these 4 sectors, and if you are, or if you know of any nonprofits, 501c3 nonprofits, they can apply under any of those different sectors. And today I want to focus, however, on the municipalities and educational campus. So this includes any Rhode Island cities, town governments, any agencies, and also public school districts, other schools, and public universities. And then for multi-unit dwellings, you can think of your residential apartment buildings, condominiums, and similar properties, and also affordable housing developers. Then for workplace, this is for private employers installing level 2 chargers for employee use or also for fleet vehicles. And then there's the last one is the publicly accessible commercial site, which is a privately owned site where EV charging is open to the public. So anyone who has an EV can go there and plug in their vehicle. What are the funding amounts? How much is available and how much is still left? So the initial budget of this program was 2.5 million, and about 1.5 million has already been allocated as of July 9th. However, there will be additional funding that is being expected in August 2026. So some of these funds we will see additional funds come through. And it's really important to note here that costs incurred prior to receiving an approval letter are not eligible for reimbursement. So if you're planning to apply for these incentives, it's important that you first do the application, look into the different charging options, and then purchase the charging stations once you have approval from the OER. This is very common for these rebate programs, that they basically reimburse you for any costs that you have incurred, but they cannot retroactively pay you for any costs prior to receiving the approval. And then here on the right, this is a screenshot from the Charge RI website, which is the program tracker. This was last updated July 9th and is being updated on a rolling basis. So here we can see how much is still available, which is around $900,000, so around 40% of the program. And then here on the bottom, you can see the different sectors. And for multi-unit dwelling, there is still about 40% available. And for publicly accessible commercial sites, the one in red here, this is currently fully subscribed. So if you're planning to apply for this sector, there's a wait list that you would have to join. But since there will be additional funding available, I'm assuming that if you get on the wait list, that you will have a good chance to potentially still get funding. And then I guess for all of you, the most interesting sector here is the municipalities and educational campus. There is still a total allocation of around 480,000, and 84,000 have been reserved, which is around 17%. And there's a huge percentage of allocation which is not reserved yet, which is around 82%. So $400,000. So this is a really good chunk of incentives that are still being available. And I would encourage anyone who's interested to apply, because we also don't really know how much funding there will be coming through in August, but also in the future if this program is going to open up again or not. And then briefly also want to mention the workplace, which is about 10% of the program funds. And there's also still about 35% available. Moving on to the munis and educational campus, the budget and how much you could get. Here in this table, you can see that there's a differentiation between level 2 and DCFC. And this is because there is a huge price point difference in those different types of charging stations. Level 2 are usually cheaper than the DCFC, just because DCFC are usually, they have higher power bit, but they also need usually more, better integration, and you need to have the electrical capacity available to accommodate a charger like that. So for level 2 charging station, you can get up to $10,000 per station and a total of $80,000 per site. And the cap in percentage is up to 85% of all the hardware and installation costs, which is around like $10,500 per station. And the maximum per site for the EJ community here on the right is $84,000. So per site is usually defined as per street address. And then for DCFC, you can get up to $50,000 per station and $100,000 per site. And then if you are in an EJ community, you can get an additional 5%, which is $52,500 per station and up to $105,000 per site. I also want to mention here that all the electric vehicle supply equipment, so all the chargers that will be installed, must be Energy Star certified. And here I've linked the EPA Energy Star website. A lot of the major brands that you probably have heard of are on this website, but please make sure that you're picking or working with an installer that is aware of this certification and is going to pick a charger from this website. And then also mention here that the level 1 does not qualify and has no Energy Star certification category. I know I haven't talked about this in much detail, but level 1 is basically the lowest level of charging output that you can get. So kind of think of it as a cable that you would plug into your regular outlet at home and then use that to charge your vehicle. This usually takes the longest time to charge your vehicle, and this is not eligible under this incentive program. How does the program work and what are the different steps? So the first step is to apply and reserve the funds. So OER has an online application portal that you would just go on the website and apply. And then you would have to wait until you receive an approval letter so that you can start the installation. So again, please don't start installation before you receive this approval letter. And sometimes they also have additional follow-up questions that you will have to respond to. And then once you complete the project, once the charging stations come online, you will receive the rebate that you got the approval letter for. And you receive that as a rebate upon completion of the project. A single organization can apply at more than one site. So if you have several sites, different street addresses, you can apply for all those different sites and different charging stations. And if you have any questions, there's a program guidance document on the website, and you can also contact ChargeAI directly through the email here on the screen. And Power Options, we have selected different vendors that we're working with. So if you use the Power Options installation program for EV charging, then our vendors will assist with the ChargeAI application process and will also identify any additional incentives to further reduce costs. So any other state or potentially federal incentives that might be available that they would take advantage of and apply on your behalf. And with that, we're going to dive into the Power Options EV charging station program. So I think what we've realized over the past years, Power Options has been around for about 30 years. And initially we started through energy procurement for natural gas and electricity. And then we realized that there are also a lot of other sectors that our members need help with. And one of them was EV charger installation. And we've seen a lot of barriers across our membership base, which is there's a lot of administrative work, maintenance, and upfront installation costs. So if you work for a city or town, you most likely have a lot of other responsibilities going on as well, where you might not have the bandwidth or the time to also take on EV charging stations and to maintain and operate them. So that's why we have revamped our program. We did an RFP a while ago. We always go out to RFPs for all of our programs on behalf of our 800 members across the Northeast to procure different services. And then we will connect our members to vetted and experienced vendors. And through our partnership, and thank you so much for having us join today and present this through our partnership with Rhode Island League of Cities and Towns and the Energy Aggregation Program. All the Rhode Island members, including private nonprofits, can access the pre-negotiated programs that we're talking about today instead of running your own RFP. So this is a huge benefit for public entities where you don't have to run your own RFP and you can simply go through our program because we did the RFP process on behalf of our members. And then you can choose the procurement model that fits your site. And I'll get into that in a second in more detail. But how do we do it? So basically, we did recently complete an RFP and we procured for services under 3 different scopes. One of them is the hardware plus networking. So think of this as just the charger, the physical charging station. And then the scope 2 is turnkey project installation, which means that an installer or vendor would come to your site. They would pick the charging station and they would do the installation and you would own the station. And then we procured under a new scope, which is scope 3, vendor owned and operated model, or also called VOOM. And VOOM is basically where the vendor, they come on site, they would own, operate, and maintain the charging station on your behalf. So this is basically where you have the least amount of effort to get the charging stations installed, and they would do the ownership and operation on your behalf, and there are limited upfront costs. We also do pre-negotiate pricing and contract terms and conditions with our vendors. We want to make sure, obviously, we are working on behalf of a lot of nonprofits and public entities, and we want to make sure that they get the best pricing. But we also want to make sure that the vendor we pick, they're not going to abandon the station. They're not going to, if they go bankrupt, we need to understand what's going to happen in those cases. So this is everything that we pre-negotiate on behalf of our members. And we also support the members' early stage interest through ribbon cutting and post-commissioning support. So we are always there in between the host, you as the host, and then the installer as well to help to get to a successful completion of the project. And then we're going to get into the different ownership models for EV charging stations under the Power Options program. So there's the VOOM program, and there are limited, if any, upfront cost So basically, the third-party vendor, you as the host, you would host the charging station, but the vendor, they would do the ownership and operations and maintenance. And for publicly accessible charging station, there won't be any upfront cost. So this basically would be for free to you. However, if there's like fleet charging, then the customer will either pay the vendor per kilowatt hour or used or a monthly flat fee. And there even might be a revenue share where applicable. So this kind of is driven by the usage of the charging stations. But in general, we do think of charging stations more of an amenity than a moneymaker at this point. However, this might change in the future. The second model here is host-owned, where basically you as the host, you would pay the upfront cost that still need to be paid after all the incentives are subtracted, and then you would own, operate, and maintain the charging station, and you would also keep all the revenue that would be generated through drivers charging the vehicles, paying for it, and you would keep all of that. And then for the last one, the hybrid model, which basically is a mix between the vendor-owned and host-owned model, where the host would pay the upfront cost, they would also own, but then the vendor would do operations and maintenance, and the revenue share will be negotiated. This is most useful for organizations that do want to retain ownership of the charging stations, but they don't want to deal with operations and maintenance. And then host-owned, we've seen interest from organizations that already have EV charging station. They already have picked a software, a certain brand they want to work with, and they do want to retain ownership. And then VOOM, vendor-owned and operated model, we've seen this being popular with organizations that don't have any experience with EV charging station and just need help, and they don't want to deal with the ownership, operations, and maintenance. So going a little bit deeper into each model. So this is kind of what we recommend, the VOOM model, which is the easiest path to EV charging on your site, so the charging station will be installed on your property, and then there might be revenue share available. We have, for vendor-owned and operated, we have selected one vendor. They have a lot of experience in the space. They're veteran-owned. We are a mission-driven nonprofit ourselves, so we always make sure that we work with a diverse range of different providers under our programs. And this provider has a lot of expertise across public, fleet, multi-unit dwelling, and restricted access charging. They also take care of full software integration, ongoing maintenance, and then also they would maximize the incentives, the charge RI, and if applicable, any utility make-ready programs. And they will also replace any underperforming chargers where needed, or in general, they can do rip and replace projects as well. The host-owned model is usually for the organizations that want to own and operate their own chargers, and the vendor supports the procurement, installation, and software a la carte or turnkey. So if you have a certain preference for a charging brand, then they will work with you. And then you as the site host will retain full ownership, control, and revenue. And the vendor here will also maximize any available incentives to reduce costs. This is best for organizations with internal capacity for operations and maintenance, or for organizations that already have a lot of experience with EV charging stations. The hybrid model is for organizations that want to own their chargers, but they don't want to operate them, where basically the vendor delivers a turnkey procurement and installation package, but you as the site host would retain ownership of the equipment, and the vendor then handles the ongoing operations and maintenance. So if the chargers are not working correctly, or if there's an issue, they will take care of that. And also under this model, the vendor maximizes any of the available incentives. And this is best for organizations that want long-term asset ownership but don't want to handle the operational lift. How to get started. So I know this was a lot of information, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. But basically, what would be the next steps? So if you're ready to explore EV charging for your site. And we talked to a lot of different organizations, some that are just getting started with EVs, some others, they already know exactly what they want. But yeah, through Power Options, you can skip the RFP to procure vetted, experienced vendors. And if you want, you can start with vendor-owned and operated model for limited upfront cost and no operational burden. However, this is an open discussion usually, which type of ownership procurement model is best suited for your site. And then we can also help maximize any of the incentives and support the application to the Charge RI program. And usually how it works is we would schedule a 30-minute call just to learn more about your site, about your needs, about what you're looking for, to tailor it to your site and your needs. And then our vendor would go on site to do a site visit to look at the electrical infrastructure. They would come up with a proposal, send it to you, we would discuss it, and then you can decide if you want to move forward or not. And so here's my contact information on the slide. Feel free to send me an email if you're interested or just wanna learn more or just have any other questions about the incentives, the Charge RI program, and how to apply. And this concludes my presentation. Thank you all so much for your attention. And if you have any questions, please let me know.
We can open it up to questions. Luke, I think you took yourself off of mute.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. So I've done charges under the NEVI program previously, and I know you kind of hit the nail on the head. As a municipality, the most difficult thing is just, it is a long process sometimes, and also we have a lot of other things going on. This typically isn't a priority. I like this program because, maybe doing a turnkey option. Under the VOOM model, how does energy get billed? Like, because we'd be supplying the energy into the site. Is that metered separately to the vendor?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it usually depends on the site. So for example, if you have a new construction building, and the vendor, they would support, or if you're doing new construction and you're already working with someone who's doing the electricity and some of the EV spots are already EV ready, then we can, and there's being a new meter installed, then the vendor can do that and they can have the ownership of that meter and then also pay the utility bills directly. However, if you have an existing building or a building where it's a little bit harder to put a separate meter in, then the vendor would reimburse you. So basically, you would still pay your electricity bill, and then they would reimburse you. However, this is also a discussion. So if you really want the chargers to have their own meter, and if that's possible, then they're happy to support you with that as well, and then pay for the utility bills directly, so that they don't have to reimburse you and go through that process.
Okay. And does the municipality still have any control over rates? Like, obviously,
Yes.
the vendor
Yeah.
is not doing it for free, I'm assuming. So.
Yeah. And that's a great question. So basically how it works from the vendor perspective, for the vendor owned and operated model, that for them, the finances will work out that they will recoup their investment over time through what they're charging the driver or any fleet vehicles. However, this is part of a negotiation, and this will also be put in the contract, how much they can charge, because obviously them recouping the investment over time is being driven by utilization. So they don't want to overcharge the driver. So they would want to be kind of in line with what's being charged in the region to drive utilization still to the charging station, but also have a conversation with you what those charging rates should be. And I guess it also depends if it's publicly accessible, or if it should be for any fleet vehicles, where then they can also negotiate kind of a lower rate for those type of, like, any municipality vehicles. But yeah, once we take a look at your site, then our vendor can also kind of give you a range, but this is a conversation that we are also having with the vendor, where we don't want them to overcharge. So because we we are working with a lot of nonprofits and municipalities, and we want to make sure the chargers are being used as well.
Yeah, it's a concern only because, obviously everything's a reflection on the municipality. So if it seems like we're overcharging for something that should be sort of a service to the community, then obviously we'll hear about it. If you don't mind, I got a couple more questions. Hopefully, if anybody else
Yeah,
wants
go
to
for
chime
it.
in, they'll raise your hands. I know we're a little late today. I do have multiple project sites that are in process right now, which it appears I'm looking at the website and they're saying they want kind of shovel-ready projects. What's the typical implementation? Like, how long does it take to turn around the decision? And does Power Options help facilitate any pre-infrastructure? And by that, I mean, I have multiple parking lots that are set to get paved like within the next month. And so I know highly unlikely any decisions of planning can be all done in that. So is anybody can consult on, hey, drop some conduits here, or here's the infrastructure to be able to get it set up?
Yeah, and that's a good question. So we are working with a lot of different projects, and actually a lot of projects where they're doing what you said. There's repaving happening right now, or new construction. So we usually say, contact us as soon as you know, so we can get in and support you. And some of these repavements, they already have plans for EV charging infrastructure, but if they don't, then our vendor can work on through that as well and kind of help you identify where to put the charging stations. And I think the earlier they're kind of brought into the conversation, the easier it will be for everyone, so that you don't have to go back and redo any electrical infrastructure. And then in terms of timeline, it looks like the Charge REI there, it seems like they're working fast as of now. And I think our vendor is ready to go. So we have a lot of different projects with different timelines, but if you say, hey, this needs to happen within the next 2 months, then we want to work with you to make it happen. I think for now, some of the timelines obviously depend on your city or town, how fast you all can move with contracting and approvals and any other internal stakeholders that need to be brought in. But yeah, and then basically, so just for timeline, so we would like schedule a call with you, and then our vendor would go on site, or if it's new construction, they can look at the building plans and then come up with a proposal. They would show that to you, and then once you sign the proposal or notice to proceed, then they will apply for the incentives, and as soon as incentives come through, then they can start the installation.
Right. So I'll schedule something offline. I'd love to get another level 2 down here. We have a few, but I'm well aware I drive a Ford Lightning and there's no DC fast chargers in South County at all. Closest ones in, they're on the 95. There's 2 locations, but Rhode Island is very light on DC fast chargers. So
Yeah. I went to school in Rhode Island, so in Providence, I'm very, very familiar. It's like it has a place in my heart. And I was also tracking the NEVI funds a few years ago in a previous role, and Rhode Island, I think, was one of the first states to spend that funding. But there, wasn't much funding available for DCFC. So yeah, I'm really excited about this new program right now, Charge REI, because I feel like we haven't seen anything come through for the past years, like in terms of like a big chunk of funding. So yeah, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm also putting my email in the chat so that we can jump on a call.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Of course. Any other questions? Oh yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Any other questions? Okay, well, Anna, thank you so much for all of this information. Super useful. And like I said, we're recording this, so I'll be sure to get it out to all of our members. Walter, thanks for being here. Good to see you. And Rita, as always, good to see you as well. So thanks everyone for attending, and we will be back again soon with another Workshop Wednesday. Thanks.
Thanks, Jen.
So much.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Anna.